Let's begin. The Parsha is Vayeshev. So up until now, we have been, we were introduced to many of the very important personalities in our struggle to create the Jewish nation. So Yaakov is starting to come to the end of his life, although there's a few more parshas where he's mentioned. And Yosef, though, becomes the main protagonist and the center person of the parshas. But let's see how that goes. It begins by Vayeshev Yaakov Eretz Muguriaviv. Yaakov is living in the same land where his forefathers lived. Which land is that? The Eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. So Yaakov is now living again. Well, let me turn off all this sound. Back in Israel. Let's see. Do not disturb. Okay. So Yaakov is now living back in Israel, just like his forefathers, Avraham and Yitzhak did. Elah told us Yaakov, these are the offspring of Yaakov. Yosef, the first thing it tells us about Yosef. What about Yosef? Ben Sheva Esra Shana, he's 17 years old. V'haya roa es achiv b'tzon. And he was together with his brothers, being a shepherd for the sheep. V'hu naris b'nei Bilha v'yaz b'nei Zilpa. And he was a young man associating with the children of Bilhah and Zilpah. Why is it telling us this? First thing is a nar, and the expression of a nar is usually meant someone who's a simple, perhaps naive young man. And the female version is a nara, a woman who's similar, inexperienced, young, somebody in their teens. And what does he do? Is he associates with the children of Bilhah and Zilpah. Now, the children of Bilhah and Zilpah are his brothers, right? They're part of the tribes, but certainly in the way that they were looked at a little bit less than the children of Rachel and Leah, because Rachel and Leah were full wives. They were the complete wives of Yaakov, while Bilhah and Zilpah were maidservants who had the role of wives, but they were a little bit less. So here Yosef is crossing social boundaries, right? You may have certain boundaries that the children of Leah all associate with each other, and along comes Yosef, and he associates with the underlings, so to speak. They're brothers, but they're sort of brothers from a different father or a different mother, and therefore it's telling you a little bit about him, that either he has a bit of an issue with his self-esteem and he sees himself as being with them, or most likely his personality was to be inclusive and he felt that there was no need for these social levels where somebody coming from Leah was going to be on a higher level by birth because of who their mother was. And therefore he would specifically go and associate with the children of the other women. And then it says that Vayave Yosef as Divas Amra al Avihem. And then it says that when it comes to his brothers in general, all of his brothers, Yosef would go and tell bad things to his father about them. Now, what he said, it doesn't tell us what he said, and what does it mean by saying bad things? But it basically is that Yosef seemed to have a certain standard of living. His father had a similar standard of living, and Yosef went and would tell the father that the brothers perhaps did not have that same standard of living. However, on a midrashic or a deeper level, there's a midrash that says the following story, and it says, what does it mean that Yosef said bad things about his brothers? So it says that when Yosef would go out to find his brothers, as we're about to read, which is a very important part of the next part of the Parsha, of him being sent to go find his brothers. When he does go out to be among his brothers, there was an argument between them, a philosophic argument. And that argument was, are we Jewish? Are the children of Yaakov Jewish? And it really depends, halakhically, it depends on how you determine who's Jewish. For instance, if the Torah has not been given yet, then nobody is probably Jewish, because a Jew is a person who adheres to the Torah. If we don't have the Torah, we can't adhere to it. You could say that we're Hebrews, we're the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're Hebrews. We are from the tribe of Hebrews that eventually became Jews, but we're not necessarily at this point in history Jewish. And there was an argument between the brothers of Yosef and Yosef to this point. Are we Jewish or are we not? Now, there are some ramifications to this, but the way that the Talmud expresses it is in a very interesting way. It says that Yosef went and told his father bad things about his brother. What did he say about his brothers that was so bad? He said that his brothers ate a limb of a living animal. Now, what is that referring to? There's an explicit mitzvah in the Torah that it is forbidden to eat in any way a part of an animal that's still alive, right? To swallow a live goldfish, to take like a leg off an animal and eat it, or eat it when it's still attached to the animal. These things sound crazy. Who would ever do such a thing? However, in society, even our society, there is a small amount of this that happens. But in ancient times, it was more common. But the Torah considers that to be an enormously painful to the animal to do that. And I can imagine why. It's pretty clear. And therefore, it's considered Aver Minachai, eating a limb from a living animal is considered a horrible thing for a person to do. And it says that Yosef went and told his father Yaakov that his brothers ate from a living animal. They ate Aver Minachai. Now, did they really do this? So that it appears that you have to understand how Medrash works. Medrash is true, but Medrash is not always literally true. That is to say, Medrash teaches us something, and it's based on a literal fact. But the story it tells is very often not literally true. So it very well could be, first thing, that Yosef's brothers did not eat from a limb of a living animal. And secondly, it could very well be that Yosef never told his father that they did that. But there's an underlying message here that Yosef probably did. And that was as follows. Let you imagine if you have a cow and you're going to slaughter that cow for meat. People are going to eat the cow, have hamburger, whatever they want to eat, steak. So if a person goes to slaughter a cow, right, what happens when you slaughter a cow, and after you slaughter the cow, you find within the cow a pretty finished or fully formed fetus that, let's say, in the next day or two would have given birth. So this cow has inside of it another cow that's about to give birth, but it hasn't given birth yet. And you come and slaughter that cow. Now you find the baby within the cow, and the baby is clearly alive. What do you do with that baby? So according to how the halacha works, if a person kills an animal and they find inside of it another animal, like a fetus about to be born, since we consider that a fetus that's within its mother is considered to be a part of the mother, so therefore, if a person would kill a cow and would go and eat that cow, go to eat the cow and find another one inside of it, he could eat the cow that was inside of it without killing it, because according to Jewish law, it's already dead, because it was found. It's like the limb of the mother, and you killed the mother. So now all of its limbs are dead. You don't have to kill its legs separately. So I'm not saying that people do this, but this is the law. The law would say that if you found a fetus that is fully formed within the mother after you shechted the mother, that fetus is considered dead, even though it's clearly alive. But that's only true for a Jew, because the Jew has the ability to to slaughter an animal using the law of shechita, and therefore this could happen. Where for a non-Jew, they have no such law. A non-Jew is not allowed to eat a limb of a living animal, just like a Jew is not allowed to eat a limb of a living animal. However, the Jew has the ability of doing it with the shechita, even though we don't do it, but it's possible. So Yosef's brothers believed that they were Jewish. At that point, they were Jewish, and therefore, theoretically, they could eat this living animal. So Yosef goes back to his father and says, my brothers ate the limb of a living animal, because according to Yosef, they're not Jewish. And if they do this, they eat the limb of a living animal, it's a horrible thing. It's painful, it's terrible, and it goes against the essence of Jewish life. And he goes and says that they did that. It's not that they actually did it. He's going back and telling his father, my brothers are acting as if they're already Jewish, and they're following the laws of being Jewish. Well, I know that we're not Jewish until the Torah is given. And so what was the bad thing he said? He said that my brothers are acting like they're Jewish. Who cares, right? They're not eating the limb of a living animal. So what are they doing that is like that? Well, one of the things is keeping Shabbos. See, a Jew has a law to keep Shabbos. However, Shabbos, according to our understanding, is a gift that God gave to the Jewish people. That is, the laws of Shabbos, the fact that we rest on Shabbos, that we don't use our cell phones, we don't do all of these things. We celebrate the creation of the world and the fact that God did it. That idea of Shabbos and all the laws of it are a gift to the Jews. And it says that non-Jews are not supposed to keep Shabbos. So let's say that Yosef's brothers were keeping Shabbos, but they weren't Jewish. So they're not allowed to keep Shabbos. But yet they felt they were Jewish. So Yosef, who felt that they're not, none of us are Jewish yet until the Torah is given, tells his father, my brothers are doing something wrong. They're keeping Shabbos when they shouldn't be keeping Shabbos because they're not Jewish. So that's basically what the argument was. Right? That's what it means that Yosef spoke badly about his brothers. It's not that Yosef was a gossip and he went and he told terrible things to his father in order that his father should like him better. What it's telling us is that Yosef went to his father to get help because his brothers were acting in a manner that he felt was inappropriate. But this showed a bit of why Yosef was a nar, was like a young adolescent, inexperienced with people, because it's saying it's a negative that he went to his father, because Yosef should have just understood there's different ways of understanding, there are different opinions, and they follow one and I follow another. And even if only one of them is ultimately true, it's not something you go and tell on them for. So Yosef's actions were odd for a person of his stature. And that's telling you a little bit about his personality, about what he did. Now, an interesting question comes out of this, and that is that we are taught that all of our forefathers kept the Torah. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Yosef, they all kept the Torah. Now, they didn't get the Torah yet, so they kept what we call a primordial Torah. That is, the concepts of the Torah. They were taught by God, but they didn't have the Torah yet. And how did they keep it? The problem is, if they kept the Torah, and I just told you that if they weren't Jewish, then you're not allowed to keep Shabbos. How did they keep Shabbos? Because it says they kept the Torah. They kept the Torah, they kept Shabbos, but if they're not Jewish, they can't keep Shabbos. So one of these is a problem. So according to one of the great Hasidic rabbis, known as the Chedushei Arim, he said that what they did was they wore tzitzit, right? You know how we wear tzitzit all the time under our clothes. So they were wearing tzitzit. Now, if they're Jewish, then you have to have tzitzit on your clothes. That's a law, right? And therefore the tzitzit are a part of your clothing because you're required to wear them. However, a non-Jew is not required to wear tzitzit. And therefore, if he wears tzitzit and on Shabbos, then he's carrying the tzitzit, even if he has no need for them. And carrying outside on Shabbos without an Erev is forbidden, and there was no Erev then. So therefore, when they wear tzitzit in order to fulfill the Torah mitzvah tzitzit, because our forefathers kept the Torah, at the same time, if they were Jewish, then they were able to wear tzitzit, and they kept Shabbos. If they weren't Jewish, then they wore tzitzit, and that caused them to break Shabbos, which meant that they were not a problem of a non-Jew keeping Shabbos. So it's a bit of a rabbinic joke, but there's truth to it. Now, it tells us now that Yaakov, Yisrael is Yaakov, Ohev es Yosef Mikol Banav. He loved Yosef more than the rest of his brothers, which right now is telling us a problem. I think any one of us knows what happens when you have one child who is obviously favored over the other children, right? It causes enormous animosity, right? And that's exactly what happens here. So here, Yosef is loved more than all of the other children, and his father makes him katonis pasim. He makes him a special wool tunic, a coat. We say that's the coat of many colors, right? And he made him a special coat, a coat of royalty. Now, Yosef was not the firstborn, right? And therefore, the firstborn was Reuven. And wearing this coat of royalty would have upset Reuven, who's supposed to be the firstborn, and have the rights of the firstborn. And he would be the royalty. He would be taking over next. And here Yosef is treated that way. The reason Yosef is because he is the son, the first child of Yaakov's most beloved wife, Rachel. And therefore that child that she has, the first child she has, Yosef, is special to him. And he treats Yosef as if he's the firstborn, which again causes animosity between the brothers. And it says, V'yira Echav, and the brothers notice this. He also, because he is beloved more than the others, V'sinu also, and they hated him. Lo yochelu dibro lo shalem, and they couldn't even speak to him in a normal manner. They were so upset with him, they couldn't even speak to him that way. And now, here's what we've got. We've got Yosef, who's now the youngest brother, who is treated special, who has the clothes of being the firstborn, of being royalty, who now comes to his father and his brothers to tell them about the dream he had. Now, again, this shows a little bit of the simple naivete of a young man, because he has this dream, which clearly shows his superiority over his brothers, and even his father to some extent. And he tells this to his brothers and his father when he knows they already have trouble with him. This would be like if I, let's say I'm supposed to be home at 6 o'clock for dinner, and I show up at 8 o'clock, and not only do I show up 2 hours late and ruin dinner, and my wife's upset enough, I come home and I tell her that I forgot to pay the electric bill and there's going to be no heat that night. Right? And it's bad enough that one thing happened, and now when I'm already in a bad place, I make it worse. Here, Yosef already is the favored son. He's already telling things about his father, to his father, about his brothers. And now he goes to them and tells them how special he is, that he has these dreams. And he says, we were out binding sheaves in the middle of the field, right? They're taking wheat, binding it together. And he says, my sheaf arose and remained standing, and all the other sheaves bowed down. So now the brother said, what? You're going to be the king? You're going to be the boss over us? You're going to tell us what to do? And they hated him even more, it says, because of his dreams. And then he had another dream, and it was similar. It says, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were all bowing down to me. And so now he tells this to his father and his brother, and now his father's going to get upset and says, what? You're telling me that I and my wives are going to bow down to you? Right? So now his brothers are jealous of him. The brothers hate him. And it says, what about his father who has to deal with this? It says his father, shomer es hadavar. His father says nothing. His father keeps it to himself. His father is clearly upset. You can see from that one line. But the father realizes the naivete, perhaps, of his son. It's the son's desire to do the right thing, but sometimes it might hurt someone's feelings. So the father doesn't say anything. Now it goes on. The story goes ahead, and it says, now the brothers went to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem, and now Yaakov tells Yosef, I want you to go out and check up on your brothers. I want to make sure that everything's okay. So he sends Yosef from Hebron to Shechem. Yosef, the young man that he is, gets lost. He's walking from Shechem to Hebron, and he gets lost. And it says, he's like wandering around in a field, doesn't know where to go. And it says, a man discovered him, and behold, he was blundering in the field. He's lost. And the man says, what do you seek? And he says, my brothers, tell me, where are they? And the man says, well, they were here before, but I heard them saying they're going to go to Dothan. So Yosef went after his brothers, and he found them in this place called Dothan. So what is this story telling us? We could have just been told by the Torah that Yaakov sends Yosef to check on his brothers, and Yosef goes to check on his brothers. He eventually gets there, and there's a whole story. But what does it have to tell us that Yosef gets lost, and some man who we have no idea who this man is, but he seems to be somebody who's a nice guy. He's not out for trouble. And he tells Yosef, what are you doing? Like, why are you wandering around here? Who are you? And what are you doing here? And Yosef, comes over to him and says, I just got lost, but I'm looking for my brothers. They were supposed to be here. They're not here. Do you know where they are? And he knows. The guy knows. That means the guy knows who he's talking to. He knows what was going on, even though he's sort of playing dumb. So here the Midrash tells us that this man was actually the angel Gabriel, the angel, that Hashem sent down to make sure that Yosef finds his brothers. And at this moment, it appears that he's lost, that he's not going to find them. But Hashem wants Yosef to find his brothers. So therefore, he sends an angel to do it. Now, there are many messages that we can get from this. One of them is what the angel says to him, and that is, Ma'ata mevakesh, what are you looking for? He doesn't say, why are you wandering around? He doesn't say, who are you looking for? He says, what are you looking for? Which is to say that this is a deeper message also. Not only telling Yosef how to find his brothers, but it's saying to Yosef, you have a life ahead of you. If you have the ability, you have to plan for life. What's your plan? What do you want to do with yourself? Do you want to be a tzaddik? Do you want to be a teacher? What do you want to be? What is it you want of life? Because I'm telling you now, the angel says, if you don't plan to succeed, you will not plan. And not planning is a way of planning to fail. You are going to fail. And therefore, he's saying, what are you looking for, Yosef? You're a 17-year-old kid. Your life is starting. What do you want out of life? And this is an important message, right? It's not that we tell our children what to be when they grow up. It's not that we have to direct them what to be. We do have to prod them. We have to encourage them. We have to help them. But it's really to find themselves so that they can be asked the question to themselves, what are you looking for life? Do you want to dedicate your life to study, which has ramifications on the lifestyle you have, the money that you'll be able to spend? Do you instead want to be a professional and support the Jewish community and support your family well, live with more dignity, spend your free time learning? What kind of life do you want? What are you looking for, Yosef? Just like you and I, they're asking us, what are we looking for? And that's the important message. So then it says, they saw him from afar, and when he had not yet approached, they conspired to kill him. So now the brothers see Yosef finally showing up to check him out. And you can imagine these brothers all hate Yosef, and they see him coming. So they decide, we're going to kill him. Why are they going to kill him? How do we justify it? Because based on that story I told you before about if they were Jewish or not Jewish, when Yosef went back and told their father that bad things about them, he was committing the sin that they believed of Moser, that is handing over the brothers, right? Getting them in trouble and getting them in trouble incorrectly. And therefore, they said that his punishment should be that he should die. He's trying to hurt us. He should die. So they said to each other, look, the dreamer is coming. So let's come and let's kill him. And we'll throw him into pit and we'll say that a wild animal ate him. And the brothers were planning to do this, but all the brothers weren't there. So of course, Binyamin wasn't there. He's not around yet. Reuven's not there because Reuven's about to come in the next moment. We'll see. And of course, Yosef is just coming. So without Yosef, without Reuven, and without Binyamin, right? You have nine brothers. These 9 brothers are conspiring. And then Reuven, why is Reuven so important? Reuven's the firstborn. He's the leader. So Reuven heard that they're going to kill Yosef. And he said, we can't allow this. So he went and he said, we can't kill him. Reuven said, no, we're not going to kill him. Let's throw him into this pit and he'll die in the pit. We don't have to actively kill him. He'll die passively. Throw someone in a pit. They can't get out of the pit. They're going to die. And not only that, the commentaries say that when he said that he threw him into a pit, that there was nothing in it. It means there was no water in it, it says. But there was snakes and scorpions. And the snakes and scorpions could kill Yosef. And that was the intent, that rather than actively going and slitting his neck or somehow killing him, they just throw him in the pit and he'll die from the wildlife there. Right? So Reuven is trying to save him because the idea is that Reuven felt that while he convinced his brothers to throw him in the pit and he'll die passively, Reuven was going to circle back, pull Yosef out and save his life. And the brothers said, okay, they went and they stripped Yosef of his fancy coat, right? And then they took him and they threw him in the pit. And then it says the pit was empty, no water was in it. As I said, why does it say the pit was empty, no water was in it? If the pit was empty, of course, no water was in it. It's telling you that no water was in it, but scorpions and snakes were in it. And then while he's in this pit and he's screaming to be let out, they sit down to eat. And now this is considered a big, really a big attack on the brothers, that they could have their brother screaming and crying to save his life right next door to them, right nearby. And they don't do anything to help him. They sit down and they have a meal. You imagine like somebody kidnaps somebody and they're screaming to help them and they just put them in a room and sit outside the room and have some popcorn, right? Here's the brothers who are supposed to be doing the right thing. They throw them in a pit and they sit down to eat. And then they say, oh, look, here comes a bunch of Ishmaelites traveling through the desert. right? They're carrying spices and so forth. They're going to send them to Egypt. Let's just give Yosef to them. That way, we'll get rid of him. He won't kill him, right? We can save him from that. So Yehuda says, what good is it if we kill our brother? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. At least we'll get some money, right? But let our hand not be upon him. We're not going to kill him because he's our brother, our own flesh. And they all agreed. So the Midianite men, the traders, passed by. They brought Joseph. They took him out of the pit. They sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And then they brought Yosef to Egypt. Then now Reuven, who's coming to save Yosef, he doesn't see any of this happening. He's not there. He comes back and he sees Joseph's gone. So now he realizes how much trouble there is. He tears his clothes as if he's mourning. He goes back to his brothers and he tells them they're gone. He's gone. Yosef's gone. He doesn't know that they know where he is. They take Yosef's coat. They kill an animal. They put blood on the coat and they said, we're going to go back and tell our father that Yosef got killed by an animal, right? Well, that way he won't get upset. And it says that they do go back and they tell him, and Yosef's father, Yaakov, starts to cry. I mean, what father wouldn't cry? His best, any child that you lose causes you to be in grief. But his favorite son, right or wrong, his favorite son, right? So he's crying. And the Midianites sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar. So now Yosef gets to Egypt. He's sold to a guy named Potiphar, who works in the court of the Pharaoh. Now the story changes. Here's where it's something funny. Right in the middle of the story of Yosef being sold, it sort of changes the channel. Like, we're watching Channel 3 here, watching Netflix, and we have this whole story of Yosef. And then suddenly, right in the middle of the story, it changes. New characters, new story, new place, everything's different. And then at the end of this chapter, it goes back to the original story. So what is this story that gets thrown in here in the middle? And it's the story of Yehuda and Tamar. So it says, at the time Yehuda went from his brothers, and he went, right, and he meets a man, and he meets the man's family, and he decides he's going to marry this woman. And she has a child, and she calls his name Er. And then she has another son, and she calls him Onan. So now Yehuda has two sons, one called Er, one called Onan. And then she has another son, and she calls him Shelah. And so now there's three sons that are born to Yehuda through this woman who we don't know yet who she is. So Yehuda took a wife for Er. So now Er is an adult, right? And he gets him married to who? A woman named Tamar. But Er, he did something wrong. He saw that Tamar was so beautiful. He didn't want her to become pregnant, which he felt would take away some of her beauty. And therefore, when they had relations, he didn't do it properly on purpose, and he spilled his sperm, his seed. And therefore, Hashem saw him as evil, and he dies. So Yehuda then says to his next son, well, there's a law that says that if you have a brother, and your brother gets married, and he doesn't have any children, and then your brother dies, there's a mitzvah for the next brother in line to marry the first brother's wife, to have a child, and then that child should be named after the brother who died. The purpose being that this is the closest you can get. You have his brother, so he's genetically similar, and his wife, who is his soulmate, his partner, his soul spiritual partner. So they get together and they have a child, and that child, it now represents the brother who died. Now, this can only be done if the family has no children. If they have one, then you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife. Only in this very specific situation. Now, this is a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah that theoretically we would have to do today. However, the rabbis, over 1,000 years ago, made a rule that we can't do this. This is called yibum, where a man marries the childless brother's wife if the brother dies. Right? We don't do this at all. We have a specific ritual we do that releases one from the responsibility of doing this. He said you can't really do this because people are not of a spiritual level. They will now do things in order to take each other's wives. So here the rabbi said you can't do this anymore. But back then they did. So what happens is now Yehuda goes to his second brother and says, look, go marry your brother's wife who died and have a child in memory of your brother. and so that your brother should live. Now, the next brother sadly does the exact same thing. He says, this woman's too beautiful. I don't want to make her pregnant. I'll marry her. I'll take care of her. I love having her with me, but I don't want to destroy her looks. So he dies. Now Yehuda goes to his daughter-in-law and says, look, I want you to marry my third son. Or she comes in and says, I want to marry your third son. I want to be part of this family. I want to marry your third son. Yehuda says, forget it. My third son's too young to get married, and he'll die. You're going to kill him. You killed the first one. You killed the second one. Now you're going to kill the third one, not realizing that it wasn't her at all. She was a righteous woman. They were doing something wrong. So he says, I'm not going to let you marry my third son. He's going to die like everyone else. So Tamar goes, and she goes back to her family, and she stays there. Then it tells us this whole story that a long time goes by, and Tamar says, I'm not going to listen to this anymore. She dresses up like a prostitute. She goes to the crossroads, and it happens to be that Yehuda, her father-in-law, right, of her dead husband, is passing on the way. And she knows the rule that if there are no brothers to do this mitzvah, then the father can do the mitzvah. So she decides she's going to trick the father. So she basically tells the father that she's a prostitute. And the father, it says, has this unbelievable compulsion, clearly coming from God, that he has to have relations with her. So he goes and he purchases her, right, from herself but he doesn't have any money. So he has relations with her, and he says, look, I don't have any money. I'll bring you money later when I come by the next time. You're a prostitute. Here you are on the road. I'll come back and I'll give it to you. And she says, well, I don't trust you. I want something as a, that I can hold on to until you come back. So he gives her his walking stick and his ring. He has a special ring because he's the firstborn that shows the significance. He says, take this, and when I come back next week, you'll give me this back and I'll pay you your money. A week goes by, right? Yehuda sends his messenger with the money. She's not there. They can't find her. Nobody's ever heard of her. No one's ever seen her. They don't know who it is. They don't realize that this is Tamar, the daughter, right, of Yehuda. As far as they know, Yehuda just thinks it's a prostitute. Now, Yehuda realizes that even though he had a compulsion, it was a wrong thing to do. Now, story goes ahead 6 months. Tamar is pregnant. She's pregnant now. She had relations with Yehuda. She becomes pregnant now, but she's not married. And she was supposed to have relations only with someone in the family, and no one in the family knows that she did this because she hid the fact. So Yehuda is the judge, and she's taken to court. And he says, as much as this is my ex-daughter-in-law, she went and broke the law, and she had relations with another man when she's supposed to wait for my other son, not knowing that it was him who did it. And she knew, and therefore it was allowed. He didn't know, and he thought he had done something wrong, and he thinks she did something wrong. So he's about to punish her to death, which is what's going to happen. And she says, whoever it is that owns this walking stick and this signet ring is the father. She doesn't say that it's Yehuda, even though she knows it's him. She doesn't want to embarrass him publicly. In fact, she will allow herself to be killed rather than to embarrass him publicly. And this is where we get the idea of why it's so important that we should not embarrass someone publicly, that it is better to die than to embarrass someone publicly. Now, that's not necessarily literal according to Jewish law, but we get it from this idea that she was prepared to be killed by the court rather than actually tell the court, I didn't do anything wrong. I had relations with Yehuda. When Yehuda was, right, she felt it was inappropriate for her to tell people that Yehuda slept with what he thought was a prostitute. So when she shows him the ring and she shows him the walking stick, he knows that it's his. And now he has a dilemma. Right? This is a dilemma, I think, that really tells us an important point, because had he chosen wrong, this would have been an example of a mighty person, a strong, very powerful man taking advantage of a woman. We had this in last week's Parsha. This is common in our society, where men are taking advantage of women's intimately, sexually, abusing them, because they have the power to give them a job or not. They have a power to harm them professionally, to take away their money. Whatever the case is, there have always been throughout history powerful men who did these things, and Yehuda was one, where he basically had relations with this woman. And if he doesn't come forth and say, I'm the father, she's going to be killed. So he has to decide, am I going to keep my dignity and she will die? Or am I going to come out and tell the truth that I did something wrong and she'll live? And it says he comes out and tells the truth. And this is where you see the division between how society today, where you get people like Epstein and these others who go and abuse women and harm women and hurt women to the point where they're psychologically damaged, they're physically damaged, their careers are damaged, and the men have nothing happens to them. And here you see an example where Yehuda shows this is the way we're supposed to do it. We're not supposed to abuse women, but if I did it, I have to pay the price. I have to show that I did something wrong. So he admits it was him. It saves her life. She then has children, right? And that she didn't do anything wrong. And those children, one is called Peretz and one is Zerach, the two children who become part of the Jewish people and are very significant parts of the Jewish people in the future. Now the story switches now to the story of Yosef, and Yosef goes down to Egypt and what happens to him. He also has a sexual or intimate issue. He gets taken over by Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is one of the leaders of the government. Of course, everybody is corrupt in these governments back then. Potiphar's wife, right, wants to have an affair with Yosef. Yosef is like the cleaning guy in the house. He's taking care of the house. Yeah, his boss, Potiphar, is a very powerful man. He's got many holdings, many things. He's like his personal secretary. So he's in the house while Potiphar's working. Potiphar's wife keeps trying to have relations with Yosef, who's an extraordinarily handsome man with no family, with nobody around to see him. Nobody's telling him what to do. He's lonely. He's been rejected by his family. As far as he knows, everybody knows it, thinks he's dead. He's now being tempted by this powerful woman to have relations with her. He has no reason not to, except for his beliefs. And as we know, he doesn't do it. And because he doesn't do it, he's punished. She gets him put in jail, but he does the right thing. Now this gives us an idea why these two stories are put together, why the story of Yehuda is stuck in here, because both of these are example of men. One of them is a very powerful man taking advantage of a less than powerful woman. And the other one is a very powerful woman trying to take advantage of a very much less than powerful man. It's showing you that the power, right, is the issue. In both cases, one case, the man fails, and then he admits it. That's Yehuda. In the case of Yosef, he doesn't fail, and he pays the price. Now, that doesn't teach you that you should not fail, that you should, right, and because you'll pay the price. It teaches you how both of them, right, had the same issue, and how both of them were able to stand up to it eventually. So now Yosef's down in Egypt. He's bought by Potiphar, right? And it says that he's put into the house, and that all the time in the house, Yosef would take care of it, and Potiphar's wife keeps trying to have relations with him. And it says that she coaxed him day after day, and Yosef wouldn't listen to be with her. And then finally, there was a special day when he entered the house to do his work. What does that mean, he entered the house to do his work? Rashi says to do his work means Yosef finally changed his mind. He was going to give in. He was enough already. Every single day, he's the only one in the house with this woman. This woman keeps coming out in ways to entice him, to seduce him. And finally, after this going on longer and longer and longer, he gives in. He's going to go and lie down with her. He's going to have relations with her. And he goes to his house to do it. There's no man of the household staff are there. Nobody's in the house besides the two of them. And she grabs him by his clothes and she says, lie with me. Come have relations with me. He suddenly realizes what he's doing. He left his garment in her hand and he fled outside. It says Yosef realizes what's going on, that he can't allow this to happen, and he runs away from her. She's holding on to his clothing. She grabs his clothing and later uses this to prove that he raped her when he didn't at all. So she sees that he's got this clothing in his hand and he runs out. So she starts screaming, this Hebrew man tried to have relations with me. He tried to rape me. And so she finally goes and gets him convicted and thrown into prison. Now, prison in those days was not like prison today. Prison today is horrible enough. But prison in those days was a pit. Yeah, that's right. What you did is you dug a pit in the ground, and it was too far down to climb out of. But it was basically just a hole in the ground. And you sat in there with all the wetness and whatever would happen. And they would throw food down for you, but that's where you were. So it says that they threw him into the prison, into the pit, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he stayed in prison. And here we find that Yosef, he was an extraordinary person. And everyone in the prison, the warden, the guards, everybody took a liking to him. They saw how special he was. And then it says, and it happened that the cupbearer of the king and the baker both did something against Pharaoh, against the king. It says that they both made a mistake. One of them, it says there was some grit in the bread. So when the Pharaoh ate the bread, he got some sand in his mouth. So he threw him in prison. The other one says that when he was drinking wine, the wine spilled on him. So he threw him in prison. Now, both now in prison. Now you're talking about two very high ranking people. You have imagine the prime minister has his own chef, his own baker, right? These are people probably the best chefs and the best bakers around. They've been vetted, they've been checked, right? They're extraordinary people. And now he takes them because they each make a mistake and he throws them into prison. Now Yosef's in prison with them. Imagine Yosef, who we see as a prince, they saw Yosef as the lowest of the low. He was an immigrant. He had spoke a different language. He practiced a different religion. He acted strangely. He was an orphan. He had no parents, no family, no one to take care of him. He was the perfect victim for them. And that's how they saw him, as a disgusting person coming from a different culture, right? There was clearly bigotry, racism against him. And here he have this low guy sitting in prison. And now you have these two ministers, right? The Minister of the Interior and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They get thrown into jail with him. And you can imagine that they aren't so happy to be there with this guy. You've got these two high-level guys, and you got a molester in jail, a raper, right? One day, Yosef and the baker and the wine steward wake up in the morning, and Yosef sees that they're in a very bad mood. There's something wrong. So he goes and asks them, why are you so upset today? Now, you'd think they'd say, who are you? Get away from us. You're a lowlife. We got no interest in you. But instead, they respond to him and they say, we had a dream. And they go through their dream. Yosef interprets the dream. And he says that the answer is, you are going to come out. Pharaoh's going to let you out. And you, Pharaoh, is going to kill. And that's what happens. Pharaoh kills one and releases the other. The one who's released, Yosef says, please remember me to Pharaoh. Right? Don't leave me down here. Because of this, we say that Hashem punishes Yosef. They have to stay there for another 2 years, that he doesn't remember him. And the reason that he punishes him is that Yosef clearly was showing a lack of faith in God, that God is going to leave him there until Yosef gets the king or the king's helper to let him out. If Yosef's going to get out, he's going to get out because God wants him out. And Yosef was on the level to understand this, and he doesn't do that. So he's punished. And it says that the baker waits 2 years until he finally lets him out. And it tells Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh finally lets him out. And he only lets him out because Pharaoh starts having dreams, right? And we know about those dreams with the 7 cows and so forth. That we'll learn about that next week, right? But now it takes you to the point where it's Pharaoh's birthday. And at that point, he restores, right, the one who's in charge of the wine. He kills the baker. And it's just like Yosef says, but the wine steward forgets Yosef. He doesn't say a thing to Pharaoh, and that ends the Parsha. There's no more discussion here. That is to say that as far as this Parsha ends, Yosef has been forgotten in prison. Anybody who knew who he was is out of prison, and nothing's going to happen. So his desire to ask the wine steward to help him, right, falls on deaf ears, and that is because Yosef was on a level that God would help him. He doesn't need this guy to help him. And because he went to him, right, then he ended up having to stay there longer. Now, this entire segment of issues in the Parsha, there is so many things to discuss, but I think that there's one area that I think that's most important is when Yosef looks to these two fellows and he says to him, Madua panim ra'im hayom. Why do you look so bad today? What's wrong? What's bothering you? And again, here Yosef is the lowest of the low in prison with two political prisoners who are, very high level, sophisticated people. And yet they respond to him because you'd think that Yosef, what is he doesn't care why they're having a bad day. Yesterday you were smiling, today you're having a bad day. We're in jail, for God's sake. Of course we're having a bad day. But Yosef notices that they're having a worse day than usual, and he comments to them about it. That, why are you look so bad today? And they tell him the answer. And because he asks and they tell him the answer, Yosef's life changes. He gets out of jail. Eventually, he gets out of jail. That idea of Yosef speaking to them, caring about them, is really one of the major ideas in this Parsha. This is really the basis of the Parsha, that he does that. And this is an important message for us, that we often have troubles in our lives. And I would say all of us have troubles in our lives all the time. Sometimes they're minor troubles. We bounce a check. Sometimes it's something very small. We're 5 minutes late for a meeting. Sometimes it's larger. Somebody's very sick. We all have troubles in our lives all the time. And we can allow those troubles to make it so that we're always looking internally. We're always looking at ourselves. We only care about ourselves. We're not interested in other people. I'm having a bad day. Don't bother me. But Yosef, who is clearly having a bad day, being in prison for being wrongly accused of raping a woman that he would not touch, right? And he specifically does not touch, but nevertheless, he's thrown in prison for this, and he's in there for years. And it says that he took the interest in somebody else's betterment, and he cared about them, and because of that, that's how he got out. And that's such a special and important message for us, that it carries over everywhere. The ability of us to see the needs of others, not just to see our own needs. Right? It's interesting. I was thinking about this for my drush, that one of the new things lately is selfies. Everybody's taking selfies. People even die taking selfies. They stand on the edge of a mountain to show a selfie on the edge of the Grand Canyon, and then they fall in. Right? But what is a selfie? A selfie is that everybody needs to know where I am today. Everyone needs to know what I had for breakfast today. Here's a picture of my cottage cheese. They put it up on Facebook. This is a reality. People are doing this. Everything about me is important to the world. But that's not what the message of Judaism is. The message of Judaism is everything about you is important to me. Your health is important to me. You're getting better is important to me. You're having enough money to live is important to me. I'm here to help you. Not just the world is not just here to help me. I want to be a giver, not a taker. And that's what the Torah is telling us here, that even under the worst circumstances, Yosef went out of his way to be outgoing and friendly and caring to these two men who probably wouldn't give him the time of day because he was sociologically so much lower than them. But nevertheless, he does this, and because of it, he saves the life of one of them, and he gets out of jail and becomes the famous Yosef, the number 2 man to Pharaoh, which we read about next week. But it's all because he said, why do you look so bad? What's bothering you today? To 2 strangers. And that's a message for us to really carry with us. And with that, I'm going to let you go. And I'll give you a couple of upcoming things we've got coming. Hanukkah is coming. We're having a Hanukkah family get together. People can come. Right, as always, you have to wear masks and you have to social distance, except for when you're actually eating. But people are going to come. We're going to have a gathering. We're going to light the menorah together. We'll sing together. We'll have a short Devar Torah. Then we'll have arts and crafts. We'll have donuts. We'll have a nice time. I hope that you'll join with us for it. We are opening slowly. This week, we have the pleasure of having with us a whole group of students from all over Toronto who we invited and we housed, and we're sponsoring a weekend with them. So we're very glad to have all of them with us as well. And we're a week away from Hanukkah and 2 weeks away from opening up all our classes. So we're looking forward to more and more expansion, and we hope that you'll all be a part of it. And in the meantime, I'm going to say goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you all in the near future. And thanks for joining me today. And every time that you do, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. All right, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Mari, you too. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.